Good morning. It's Monday, October 6th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 731 days old, and tomorrow marks exactly 2 years since the October 7th attacks. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back to the FDD Morning Brief. It's high drama in Israel, Gaza, and Egypt. Actually, come to think of it, it's high drama all over the Middle East right now after 2 years of war. Donald Trump has put a deal on the table, and nobody has said no. Hamas hasn't exactly said yes. It's more of a yes, but, and that's apparently good enough for government work. Donald Trump has convinced Israel that there's sufficient reason to go along for the ride. Bibi ordered the Israel Defense Forces to stand down unless it comes under direct fire. Qatar is pressuring Hamas to agree to Trump's terms. And according to Amit Segal, an Israeli reporter this morning, Qatar could actually be muzzling Al Jazeera's anti-Semitic and anti-Israel vitriol. So now, if everything shakes out the right way, there could be a hostage deal and an end of conflict agreement. Am I confident about this? I mean, come on, I'm a professional pessimist. But do I think that this is the best chance we've had for peace in the region since October 7th? Darn tootin' I do. More on that in just a few minutes. Today's guest is Elliott Abrams of the Council on Foreign Relations. Previously, Elliott served as U.S. Special Representative for Iran and Venezuela during the first Trump administration and Deputy National Security Advisor for President George W. Bush. Today, we're going to reflect on how 2 years of Israel's multi-front war have fundamentally reshaped the Middle East. Couldn't think of a better guest for that. Elliott will be joining us shortly, so stay tuned. Reports suggest that Donald Trump's 20-point plan is gaining traction. This is a good thing. I welcome peace in the Middle East. Heck, I'd welcome an uneasy calm after the 2 years we've just had. But even if this war ends, there are a few threats that I'm keeping my eye on. In fact, wasn't that one of the lessons learned on October 7th? Don't ignore those gathering storms. Okay, first, the Houthis. Even if they stop firing missiles at Israel after a ceasefire with Hamas, the threat remains. The group first formed back in 2004. It was initially a minor nuisance to the government in Sana'a. Then it attacked Saudi. Then it toppled the regime in Yemen. Now they control half the country and they're blocking maritime traffic in the Red Sea. And don't forget that arsenal of ballistic missiles. This ain't over by a long shot, folks. Neither is the threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran. They haven't given up on building nukes, ditto on ballistic missiles. Unfortunately, that 12-day war back in June might have just been an amuse-bouche, a little taste of what may come. Finally, keep an eye on Turkey. It's a regional power with an autocratic, anti-Semitic, and Hamas-loving leader. He runs his mouth about destroying Israel. It actually reminds me a lot of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as if we needed another one of those. Sure, I'd be thrilled if the war ends, but as my colleague Cliff May always says, there are no permanent victories in the Middle East, only permanent battles. So stay tuned. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, the U.S. government approved a new aid package for Lebanon's security forces. It's somewhere between 230 and 246 million bucks. Reports vary. The funds are earmarked for the Lebanese Armed Forces, otherwise known as the LAF, and the Internal Security Forces, or the ISF. The LAF will reportedly receive at least 190 million bucks, and the ISF will rake in 40 million, give or take. Congressional aides told Reuters that the funds were released right before the fiscal year ended on September 30th. This is the second security assistance package in a month. Earlier in September, the Pentagon announced a $14.2 million package, including equipment to help the LAF dismantle Hezbollah's weapons and infrastructure in southern Lebanon. A lot of taxpayer money is going to Beirut, all with the goal of disarming Hezbollah. And the thing is, the Lebanese government has a plan, but it hasn't actually adopted it, at least not that I've seen. So we could be throwing money at a failed government that continues to rely on Israel to do its dirty work. I suppose that's better than getting in Israel's way. But here's hoping Congress keeps a close eye on these funds. We've already flushed a lot of dollars down the Lebanese commode over the years. Headline 2, Syria held elections for the first time since Bashar al-Assad's fall. That happened yesterday. Syrians went to the polls to vote in their parliamentary elections. Well, most Syrians' elections were postponed or otherwise just canceled in 2 Kurdish provinces, as well as in the province of Soweto, which was the site of those bloody summer clashes between government forces and Druze militias. There are 210 seats in Syria's parliament. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, otherwise known as Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, will appoint 1/3 of them. The rest will be elected through so-called electoral colleges in districts across the country. So no popular vote. Seats for each district are distributed by population. All said, approximately 6,000 electoral college members voted in 50 districts to fill 120 parliamentary seats. In case you didn't catch all of that, and I'm not sure even I did, don't fret. The upshot is that Syria is starting to look a little more like a democracy, except in the provinces where it isn't. Right, clear as mud. Headline 3. Let's talk about that Gaza flotilla. First, the good news. Israel intercepted all the boats and there was no violence or bloodshed. But poor Greta Thunberg was grumpy because she wasn't greeted with hugs and a dance party. The upside may be the accumulation of frequent flyer miles for Greta. At the rate she's going, she might get a first-class upgrade on her next deportation. Okay, now for what I'm watching. Over the weekend, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim confirmed that 23 Malaysian flotillers were flying from Israel to Turkey for health checks after their ordeal. Why do I care about Malaysia? Because it's long been hosting Hamas operatives. The Mossad has even whacked a few of them over the years in Malaysia. In recent weeks, Ibrahim has slammed Israel for its war in Gaza, and he's been calling for peace, even as his country has played patron to the terror group that started this war. The hypocrisy is disgusting. Meanwhile, in Turkey, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets yesterday in solidarity with the flotillers, that's what we're calling them. Istanbul and Ankara were both flooded with pro-Hamas placards and activists. Once again, I warn you, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is an autocratic, anti-Semitic, jihad-loving, Hamas-supporting thug of a world leader. He happens to also sit in NATO, which is insane. Watch this space, folks, because Turkey may be a NATO member for now, but it's fast on its way to becoming a new Islamic republic in the Middle East, akin to that of Iran. All right, I'm done. Now it's time for my conversation with Elliott Abrams of the Council on Foreign Relations. So let's dive right in. Welcome to the program, Elliott Abrams.
Good to be back, Jonathan. Thanks.
You're a repeat offender, and we appreciate it. Let's start with your recent piece in the Free Press. Break it down for us. What does it mean when Hamas says yes, but to the Donald? I mean, Donald Trump said that was it. We had one offer, and then Hamas said, well, okay. So how is this group hedging, and how did they get away with it?
Well, Trump originally said 72 hours, which would have been Sunday night, last night. But Hamas is getting away with it. They know Trump wants this to work, so they're stretching it out. Yeah, we agree in general, we'll release all the hostages. But which Israeli prisoners are we going to get back in exchange? And when do the Israelis move back in Gaza? Where? And no doubt they're getting encouragement from at least some Arab governments. I would think Qatar would be one, to say, oh, hold on. You don't just have to surrender. Start negotiating. Unfortunately, President Trump is unpredictable on these things. His immediate reaction was to say, Israel's done the right thing, and now you guys in Hamas have to deliver. But then he said, now Israel has to stop. Now, more recently, he said Hamas has to agree that time is running out, or there'll be terrible outcome. So he's wavering back and forth because I think he wants the deal to work more than he cares about what's in the deal.
I think that's probably right. We want to win here. I think that's what the White House is looking for. And I think, by the way, most people are looking for that because they want the war to just end. They want it off the headlines. They want it off the books. All right, but let's talk about how this deal all ties back to the Israeli strike on Qatar back on September 9th. My colleague, Natalie Icano, and I just published a piece about it in commentary. I saw what you wrote about it in the Free Press. So it looks like we're kind of having a Vulcan mind meld or something. Share your thoughts on how that strike figured into the picture, please.
I think it's critical. I think the Qataris have been playing a game for decades with the United States, where they get U.S. protection, they give us the Al Udeid base, then they have Al Jazeera, which is broadcasting hatred of America and of Israel every day. They play this game. I think what happened when Israel struck them was they got terrified, because if Israel can strike Hamas guys in Doha, they can strike the Qatari royal family. They can strike whoever they want. So the Qataris go to Trump and they say, this can't happen. You've got to prevent this. You've got to make sure this never happens again. And Trump, I think, had the right response, which was, yeah, produce Hamas. You guys have been bankrolling them. They sit in Qatar, in Doha. Produce them for my peace deal. And I think Qataris were, in fact, terrified. And so they went to Hamas and said, this is it. Now the question is how much they think they can finagle Trump. They can compromise Trump, knowing that he wants this deal to work, and knowing, as you and I have said, we know which side Qatar is on. They are Muslim Brotherhood supporters, which means Hamas.
Yeah. And I guess there's also a question, Elliott, of whether they can even deliver Hamas, because they're not the only patron of Hamas, right? I mean, you got the Iranians here in the picture, and they've been giving them cash and weapons and training and indoctrination for years. And I'm not sure that the Qataris can deliver. And if they don't, well, then maybe Trump pulls this security guarantee that he's offered them. We can talk about Iran in just a minute, but I want to ask you one thing about you. Well, you stated in your piece that the entire Arab League has turned its back on Hamas. I mean, I tend to think that, of course, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, I mean, I think they have. But you mentioned, of course, the Qataris, they're probably ambivalent. I think if you look at the rhetoric of like Algeria and Kuwait, they're still squarely backing the guys in Gaza. I mean, I think there's some ambivalent ones, including maybe Jordan. I mean, these are kind of fence sitters. Do you think that Hamas has truly worn out its welcome in the Arab world? They've been celebrated since 1988 by the Arab League.
I think there's a division here. First, among governments. Algeria, for example, that you mentioned, has always been the most supportive. When Algeria makes pledges, for example, money for the Palestinians, it actually pays the money. Whereas many of the others, including Kuwait, delay because they don't really want to. I think the main division here is between governments and populations. And I think many of these governments really distrust Hamas and think that Hamas is dangerous for them, including the Jordanians. They know who Hamas is. They know that this is a form of Islamist radicalism that would be happy to overthrow the king tomorrow morning. They know that. But they've got to deal with the public opinion that they themselves have created over time. Same thing in Saudi Arabia. I think, would the crown prince like to normalize with Israel someday? Absolutely. But again, he's got a real population, not expatriates, Saudis of about 30 million, who are now riled up against Israel. So I think what you saw in that so-called New York Declaration that was signed by every country in the Arab League was the statement that Hamas has got to lay down its arms. Hamas cannot be part of any future government of Gaza. I think that is the view of just about every Arab government, but they're going to seesaw back and forth, watching what's happening on the battlefield and watching Trump.
Yeah, I think so too. But I do think that the big message, and I think this is what you and I both wrote about, is that, you know, once those Israeli weapons, once those Israeli bombs reached Qatar, I think there was an understanding that that war had encroached upon the Persian Gulf. And so all of a sudden it meant that the war wasn't just all the way over there, you know, in the Levant, and the countries like Lebanon and Jordan and Israel are going to have to just deal with this problem. And we're going to be over here just kind of enjoying the, you know, the oil revenues that they pull in. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, I think we need to stop this thing so that it doesn't spill over any longer. And I do think that seems to be the tipping point in the Arab League.
It is worth going back to something you said a couple of minutes ago also about can, cut, or deliver, because they've got these guys sitting in the Four Seasons Hotel in Doha, these Hamas leaders, but they're not on the ground, obviously, in Gaza. And it's not clear whether they have any control over the guys in Gaza who are the successors to Sinwar, whom the Israelis killed. There does seem to be some difference here because the guys sitting in those hotels, they like it. Yeah. They want a deal because they want to continue their wonderful lifestyle.
And you have, and I think to that point, you've got Khalil al-Hayya, who's going to Egypt, and he's going from Qatar. They put him on TV on Saturday night, and he's sort of, you could tell the mood music was not great. He didn't look happy to be declaring that he was kind of suing for peace. But the guy that they really need to, they call al-Hayya the head of Hamas in Gaza, but he's been based in Doha, right? The guy that they really need to convince is Izzadin al-Haddad, who nobody knows. This is the guy that became the leader of Hamas literally by the process of elimination, because you had the Sinwar brothers killed, you had Mohammed Deif killed. There's nobody left, but they call him in Israel the last Hamas commander, and nobody knows where the heck he came from. So I think it's some pretty interesting drama here. But let me ask you, you note at the end of your piece that military pressure is the best way to hasten this process. But Donald Trump has just reined in Bibi. He just asked Bibi to hold the IDF back and only fire when fired upon. So do you think that gives Hamas too much room to maneuver here, or do you think we're on the right path?
I think it's okay if it's a matter of, 3 days, 4 days, even a week. Let's play this out. Obviously, Trump knows, we all know, that Hamas may try to drag this out for months on end. But to give it a few days is fine. My own view is that today's Monday. By the weekend, if Hamas isn't coming across, I hope that Trump will say, I told you there would be consequences. You're playing me. I hope he'll do that. He will obviously be urged by a number of Arab leaders. No, give it more time, give it more time. But I hope he's true to his word on this one.
Yeah, me too. I think he will unleash Bibi. The only question actually is whether Bibi walks through that door, because there are, of course, consequences for Israel in terms of the isolation that it's been facing around the world. Even if the president gives you a green light, that doesn't mean that the Europeans or anyone else is going to like it. And you can definitely see how the international community has been coming down on Israel like a ton of bricks. How do you like the role of Egypt here? They've stepped up to the big leagues, right? They're owning these negotiations. But I keep hearing about an Egyptian military buildup in the Sinai and how it's worrying the Israelis. How do you view Egypt right now?
I think the thing we have to realize is that Egypt doesn't care about us, and it doesn't care about the Palestinians at all. You have to view this from the point of view of President Sisi and the Egyptian army. They don't want one Palestinian in Egypt, in Sinai, not one. How many refugees have they allowed? Old people, sick people, children, zero. So they don't care about the Palestinians. What they care about is some kind of outcome here that protects Egypt. They would like to see the reconstruction of Gaza, because a lot of that billions of dollars would go through Egypt, and they can take 10 or 20% off the top. Everybody can get rich. So they're for the plan from that point of view. But what's been troubling, and it's what you just said, when they have military exercises, the enemy is Israel. The buildup, something like 70%, give or take, of the Egyptian army is now east of the canal. It's in Sinai. Why? So I do worry about the Egyptian position. Of course, the other mediator is Qatar. So, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. The only thing you can hope for is that the Egyptians are more interested in calm in Gaza. And the Egyptians, this is a good thing. The army in Egypt, which runs the country, hates and fears the Muslim Brotherhood. The Qataris support the Muslim Brotherhood. That's an advantage in having Egypt there.
Yeah. I got to tell you, though, trying to game this out, it's not easy. This is some confusing stuff. I will just say for folks listening or watching, I cannot get a straight answer out of the Israelis in terms of exactly what that buildup looks like, what they're worried about in Sinai. The messaging that's coming out of Egypt is apparently not great at all. I mean, we had Sisi calling Israel an enemy about a week or two ago. There's a lot of drama behind the scenes. We understand that Ambassador Mike Huckabee may be going to Cairo to deliver some messages on behalf of Israel and the United States about getting the Egyptian military to dial it back, but definitely higher tension than we've seen in a very long time. Maybe more tension than we've seen since the signing of the Camp David Accord. So that's obviously something we're going to continue to watch and monitor, but not a lot of clarity coming out of Israel. Usually leaking is kind of a contact sport in Israel, not anything coming out of that system right now. It's really interesting, but scary. Okay, Elliott, before I let you go, we're not hearing much about the role of Iran in all of this. I did see a news item this morning in Al Arabiya, of all places, saying that Iran would welcome an end of conflict if it would save lives. I mean, that seems like a positive thing, but I guess my question is, do you expect Iran to play the spoiler here? I mean, what if they have more sway over Hamas than Qatar or Turkey or some of these other Arab states that have tried to go in and set the table for a peace agreement? Do you think Iran's going to try to scuttle this, or do you think they'll let it go through?
I think they will try. I think they don't have much sway now because they have no way of getting arms and money to Hamas. But sure, they don't want this deal. They don't want Israel better off. They don't want Israel's war to end. They love seeing the European and Arab attacks on Israel for genocide and other lies. So they will do what they can to scuttle this deal. I just don't think they have as much sway as they did 6 months ago.
Yeah, still trying to fight Israel to the last Arab. Sounds very much like the Iranian strategy. All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you, Elliott Abrams, for joining us today. Repeat offender here on the FDD Morning Brief.
My pleasure.
Always good to hear from Elliott. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD's John Hardy has a piece in the New York Post about the steps Trump is taking to pressure Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Donald is now helping Ukraine hit Russian oil refineries, and he's reportedly weighing the option of giving Ukrainians long-range missiles to strike deeper in Russia. John argues that military pressure combined with economic sanctions might finally convince Putin to stop fighting on terms Ukraine can live with. Yes, sir, Mr. Hardy. You are correct. Next up, FDD Saeed Ghassaminejad and energy expert Aydin Panahi explain in the National Interest how Iran evades sanctions and rakes in cash by selling oil to China. They lay out 5 practical ways to curb the smuggling and dry up the funds that Iran uses to bankroll its terror proxies. This should be required reading for the Treasury Department, folks. And in foreign policy, my colleagues Ivana Stradner and Mark Montgomery reflect on Moldova's recent parliamentary elections. Russia flooded the country with disinformation, but Moldova's voters didn't fall for it. Ivana and Monty celebrate the pro-Western government's party win, but they also warn that this was just the opening act. Russia will keep on trying to influence Moldova, which has become a battleground between Moscow and the West. It's time to wrap this episode up like a breakfast burrito. Yes, it's time for my breakfast. How'd you know? Anyway, if you're craving more brainy content, check out the expert analysis on our website, fdd.org, and across all of our socials. Also, please do consider making that generous tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest. Tune in Wednesday for another episode of the FDD Morning Brief, the day after the 2-year mark of this war. It'll be an important episode, so please do check it out. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.